Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm delighted to be here and we're going to have a great show today. So let's get started. I'm Eddie Pratt. I'm the Managing Director of Product Focus. I've been practicing product management for about 20 years now, since my first job in Silicon Valley. Firstly, a couple of housekeeping things today. We've got 3 parts to the webinar. We've got a very brief introduction, then the main webinar content, and then a short Q&A session. Product Focus are global thought leaders and Europe's leading product management training company with a focus on technology-based products. We offer 2 training courses, Product Management, Product Marketing, which is our certification training for new product managers or product managers who want a skills refresh. And we have Leading Product Management, which is for people leaders of product management teams and departments who want to build and run a high-performing product management function. Over the last 17 years, we've worked with global multinational mid-sized organizations and startups across many sectors. We are delighted to say we have a 5-star rating on Trustpilot with over 800 independent reviews. And to help product managers, we provide free world-class resources, including journals, infographics, white papers, and industry reports. And you can sign up free to our toolbox on the website. In today's webinar, I hope to help you with learning some great ideas about how to approach talent development, to think about core competencies that you and your team and your business need in your product managers, to discover some tactics that you could use for growing your product managers, and to learn some ways to measure talent development efforts. So let me start with my journey. I moved from being a product manager, expert product manager, I hope to think, to become a people leader. So, I'd learned a lot about how product management works, to develop products, launch them, but not about developing people and talent. So I learned the hard way. And the reason I've created this webinar is to help you, so perhaps it won't be as hard for you on your people development journey. And what I learned is, as a leader of product managers, you're only ever as good as your team. If you don't hire people, you don't have a team and you won't deliver anything. And so I realized that product managers and the team have really become the real product as a team leader that you need to manage and to grow. And your product managers become value multipliers across your organization. They represent you and your team, and their impact is amplified right across the business. Now, here's the secret. If you make a successful product manager, you're going to be successful yourself. So, successful product managers, successful you, successful business. So let's look at approaching talent development. When I first started leading a team, I had this kind of naive view of training. Oh, we just need a training course. And, that solves all the problems. And then I realized that was really naive and it's only part of the people development puzzle. And really, of course, what I quickly learned was that developing a talented team wasn't someone else's job. It wasn't the job of the L&D team, the learning and development team, although they could help me greatly. Development of talented PMs and a team was a core part of what I had to dedicate my time to. I wasn't just an expert product manager. I had to become an expert in people and growing teams and developing talent. And, training alone isn't a panacea, but what can help? Well, so how do successful product leaders approach talent development? Well, I'm going to answer this by walking through these 7 areas today. And we'll start with looking at setting clear expectations. So clear expectations, absolutely fundamental to getting things right with the team. As leaders, we need to get super clear about what we need from our PMs, not only in goals and, performance outcomes, but we need to think about what we need them to excel in, what we need them to be excellent at. And competencies are often this word used, especially when you're working with L&D teams and HR. And competencies are really just a mixture of attitudes and behaviors, knowledge, experience, and skills. And so it's the full package of what you want in people, who they are, how they operate, what they're skilled in. And they're important because they appear across an organization, especially as your organizations get large. You need to think about coordinating competencies across the organization. So let me show you what I mean. So here I'm showing how competencies are central to an organization. And as an example, let's look at one concrete competency to make it come to life. So what would a competency perhaps be? Well, let's say in the middle we see there that the competency we might expect of product managers could be around creating product strategies, effective product strategies aligned to the company strategy. So here's why it's central to success in the organization to get very clear about the competency set that you want for your product managers. So if we think about when hiring, so if we start in the bottom left of the diagram, when hiring, we need to mention the competencies and the expectations, not only in your internal role descriptions in your company, but in your external job adverts. Moving up to the learning and development, training and accreditation, the L&D team might be providing training courses and materials to help product managers to learn and build the skill of effective strategy creation. Thinking about the next area, product management activities, well, that's the key one, because when managing your product, you're expecting your product manager to be able to apply that skill in an artful way to actually do that on the job to create strategies. Then if we swap over to look at the career pathways there, when you're looking at career pathways, often called job ladders or career ladders, that competency will appear at different levels on the job ladder for everything from a junior product manager up to perhaps a group product manager or a director. So the competencies cross across different job families. So importantly, as a leader, when you're trying to think about how effectively people are applying things, you would be looking at performance assessments, which is that grid on the right. This grid represents a common way of assessing people at a large scale called a 9-box. And so what you might want to know is how well are the different people in your team applying a particular competency so you can assess, are they on track? Should they be promoted? Do they need improvement in different areas? And then, of course, the really key thing for you as a product management leader of people is in your people operations, in your calendar, in your daily and weekly and monthly activities. You need to be thinking about the one-to-one meetings, the development conversations with the people that you're coaching and developing in your team. You need to be thinking about the competencies in that respect so that you're looking for the competencies which need to be developed and improved. So there are lots and lots of competencies in many dimensions that you could choose from. You know, you can create a super person that has, a million competencies, but that's too much. And as a product leader, you need to think about the competencies that specifically you need as a leader. You've thought about it in your team. What does your team need to successfully manage and deliver products in your organization? So in some ways, there's finessing competencies in your organization to make it specific for you for success with your people in your team. And, but we need to be realistic. There has to be a core set of competencies which is manageable and the ones that are essential to drive business outcomes. But we also need to be realistic, because if you have too many competencies, how are you going to easily find and hire and develop people? There are just too many things. So that's why you have to hone them down. Too many competencies is too much complexity. And as we've seen in the previous slides, competencies are central to success. So you need to align them with the HR and learning and development teams, because they're used and shared throughout the organization. You can't do them in isolation. So let's look next at how you might use competencies in a tool to use when you're interacting with your product managers, when you're talking about development, when you're working out are they above or below the grade in terms of how they're operating. So here's a simple Excel template that we provide to delegates of our training courses, and it's easily adapted to include competencies, like we talked about, developing strategies or taking a leadership position. It's easily adapted to make it relevant for your PMs and your team and your company. And so typically what you'll do is you'll have a set of competencies which are clustered into different areas. So here we have people and client, personal and delivery, with kind of some competency categories in there. And this makes it more manageable for a start. And so as a people manager, what you'll be doing is working on the growth and development of your product managers. You'll be assessing in which of these areas they excel and where they need a bit of support and development. And together with the product managers in your team, you might be jointly reviewing these competency areas and trying to get a shared view of where do they think their skills are in terms of fluency, where are they on a no competency to really competent, and what's your view of where they are? And so that's what you're seeing in this spider diagram or strange diagram in the middle. It's kind of mapping out all of the competencies, and the manager's view, which is the scores on the table on the left, are represented in orange, and then you've got the employee's view, which are represented in white. So it's kind of a collaborative way for you to get a shared understanding of what you think the competency levels are and what the employee thinks the competency levels are, your PM person in your team. And this can really help to give you, to focus your ideas for their personal development and growth plans. Where do they need help? How are you going to make them superstars in the critical competency areas? And of course, there are other competency examples in the template as well. There's no magic recipe about the format of this. You just need to put some careful thought into what the competency areas are to succeed in your team, in your company, with your products. So a couple of other slides from the competency groupings in the Excel. I'm not going to go through these now, but these are the details behind the competency clusters. And so this is where, as a leader with your L&D and HR teams, you're starting to think about what is the detail that you actually want someone to do in these different areas. And so I'll leave these because you'll download the slides at the end, hopefully. And these are the people and client competency areas. And these are the competency areas for personal and delivery. And so that should start to give you some ideas of some competency areas that you might include. And of course, you may have fewer than this. You may have the same number, you may have a few more. So let's move on now from setting clear expectations and the competencies that might be important for you to drive outcomes and success in your business. And let's look at promoting continuous learning as another element of successful talent development in an organization. So learning is a journey. We should all know this ourselves in life. It's not a one-off exercise or training intervention. It's a continuity through the life of a product manager in your organization. And so really, you really want to promote learning and growth as an expectation in your team. And yourself, you should talk about where you're learning. You should walk the talk. You should talk about, what you've been doing to learn new skills, how it's helping you to grow. And by demonstrating and modeling that, you can set the expectation that that's what you expect with your product managers. And by making your product managers engaged and thriving and growing and learning, it's a win-win for you and the business. People are more motivated, more switched on, more engaged, better output, better outcome, and it's better for everyone in the team and the business. And so you need to tell your PMs, and this is what I personally did with people that I work with. It's my goal as a people leader to make people in the team more competent and capable and valuable in the time during which they spend with me in the team. I expect them to leave the team in a better state than they entered the team, more valuable and more capable and competent. And I think if you have that truly in your heart and your mind, that you have the best interest of the employee in mind, of your product managers, it's going to lead to a great relationship and a great outcome for you and success in the business. So you're looking to maximize your product manager's strength, and you want to think about how do you keep them growing and avoid stagnation. So this next diagram is an interesting one, because if you're a product manager, I'm hoping most of you are product management leaders, you'll recognize this as something that looks like the life cycle of a product. Well, what I've done here in a little bit of an unusual way is to visualize and draw a parallel to show that, in a way, product managers have a life cycle in your organization. So if we look at the left axis first, you might think of this as employee capability or employee engagement, or even value delivered to your organization. So if you go to the bottom axis and you imagine that when a person, you first start interviewing and hiring, you haven't even got anybody in the organization, so there's no value delivered, but then you hire and onboard and you start to bring value into the organization. The person starts to engage, and then you move into growth. So this is when the person's operating in the business, and so we're into in-life people management. And in this situation, we've got the person working on the job, they're getting feedback and coaching from you, they might be experiencing some training, so having some development discussions over weeks and months and years, and there may be some promotions in there. So we can see that with in-life people management, there are several activities happening which lead to growth and maturity of the product manager in your business. And at some point, they might start to experience a bit of a decline. This is ups and downs. It's not a perfect curve. And at that point, what you want to be doing is to identifying any stagnation where people aren't engaged, where they're not motivated. And what you're trying to do is to then re-engage people with different initiatives to give them more things to excite them and to engage them in the business to keep them growing again. And so at this point, you're hoping to get high performing people if you're doing all of the right people management and development activities in the growth and maturity phase. So this is a diagram that I'm including because it's often a reference model used in learning and development, and it talks about how people learn and where they get the amount of learning from. And the point of this is that, learning isn't the only answer through training. It's part of the puzzle. It provides a good foundation across the team in terms of capabilities, but a lot of the deep learning is happening through on-the-job application and learning from you with your coaching and through colleagues. And this is where, as a leader, this is really crucial part of their learning and growth, with your expectation setting, your coaching, showing them about what you expect, where you need them to excel, the growth opportunities that you can work on together to guide their personal development. And, it took me a while to realize, wow, I've got to invest quite a lot of my personal time to finding, hiring, growing, setting expectations, and to produce a high performing team. And that was a little bit of an epiphany for me when I discovered the amount of effort to make great teams and great people work. So I'd like to say that, I mentioned at the beginning that as a leader, developing your PMs is a crucial part of your job, and I'm trying to emphasize that. So another part of the puzzle, about leaders, high performing leaders, developing people, is fostering a culture of feedback. It's very hard to improve in a vacuum, and people need feedback to grow and improve their performance. So what about fostering or creating a culture of feedback? Well, you should start to normalize it. What I would say is don't make feedback some exceptional thing that only happens in a very rigid way. You should be continually feeding back and expecting people to feed back to you in team meetings, in one-to-one discussions, in development sessions, in casual, informal chats with people. And I've learned in some ways, you really need to learn how to give feedback constructively. And so what I would say is you should get some training on how to do that for yourself and your teams, because feedback delivered in the wrong way can be very destructive and not very helpful. And so you need to think about the timing of feedback, often as soon as possible after the feedback's necessary, and the skills on how to deliver it in a constructive way, where really what you're looking for opportunities to deliver the feedback in a formal and informal way. You want it to be constructive and focused really on people's specific behaviors and outcomes rather than focused on their personal traits. And so one other tip would be try to make use of systematic feedback as well. So where you're having the normalized feedback conversations, your team is a sharing feedback rich environment, you want to use some technology, for example, like surveying or feedback apps, or often you'll have a business process and calendar where you have some formal 360-degree feedback, although you can often ask for that casually. What I would say is try to use that on a regular basis and encourage your teams to use it as well. And the most important thing actually is that when you do get feedback, that you work through, whether it's your own feedback or feedback with your teams, is that you work through the feedback with them to understand, do they understand it? Do they agree with it? What do you do with the feedback? How do you action it? And to show that actually feedback leads to change and to improvement. And so one of the things there is to actually celebrate and demonstrate and talk about how feedback is important to growth, and that isn't just something which is a mechanical activity which doesn't get acted upon. So let's talk a little bit about providing growth opportunities. So what about providing growth opportunities? Well, you need to understand each of your product managers. Everyone's different. You need to understand what motivates them, what their aspirations are. Do they want to climb? How high? Do they want to lead people? Or do they just want to do a solid job and deeply master their product management skills and craft and work on a product? And we all learn differently. So we need to understand the learning styles and motivations to best match the growth opportunities which we try to broker and work into the development plans of our individual product managers. Now, some product managers will be self-directed, self-learners, and they'll just propel themselves forwards. You'll just have to give them a bit of encouragement and they'll be whizzing off like a rocket. But other product managers need a little bit more structure and a little bit more help. And so most PMs will respond well to some combination of training, on-the-job learning activities, and help with your coaching and assistance. And I think the coaching and assistance isn't an optional for me. It's an integral part of the role, as I mentioned. So let's look at some growth tactics. So when you're a leader, you're wondering, when people are asking, how can I grow? They might just think that growth through promotion is the only way to grow. And so as a product management leader, you can't promote everyone and not everyone should be promoted. What you're trying to look at is some tactics which you can give meaningful growth to people when you've diagnosed and worked out what the problem is, what the growth challenge is. And so what I've tried to do here is to cluster growth opportunities into similar groupings. So, moving from the top to the bottom, we've got directed or self-directed learning, coaching and mentoring, on-the-job experience and development, and collaborative learning. And most of the items there should be self-descriptive, I think they should be. And again, the key here is to consider a selection of growth opportunities depending upon uniquely that product manager that you're working with. One size won't fit all, but then again, you've got some things which will fit most people. And so what you want to do is to choose a combination. Like I mentioned, it might be some formal training, coaching from you. It could be managing products at different life cycle stages. If you've never launched a product, well, you're not going to have some of the skills and competencies around launching. If you've never retired a product, you won't know what it means to retire a product at the different life cycles. And you probably want a good dose of speaking to customers and getting close to people outside the building. So again, what I would say is the answer always isn't promotion equals growth, because you have a defined hierarchy. You might not have many steps of hierarchy for people to be promoted. So you might have to be thinking about lateral movements. And so really, what I would say is, if you explore these areas here, as a leader, you'll find out actually you've got loads of opportunities to help people grow, and a lot of them aren't expensive or complex, and they could really delight the people in your team because they feel like they're progressing, moving, expanding, and growing. So you'll be able to refer to this in the PDF at the end, so don't worry about the detail here. So a key thing, which strangely in a lot of companies I've been in, is it's not clear how you actually advance in the organization. It's a little bit of a mystical art, and people start to believe it's about who you know and not what you're capable of. And so a key question that your PMs will ask is, how do I advance? And of course, advance means different things to different people. But you need some type of career ladder. And this can be represented in different ways, but you need some sort of pathway for individual contributors, those people who want to be experts in the craft of managing products rather than people. And you need some sort of career ladder for people leaders who, they become experts in delivering results through teams of product managers. And so there's typically some sort of crossover from being an individual contributor, the expert product manager, to being a manager or a people leader. And the interesting thing here is how it ties into competencies, because they do tie together. And let's look on the next slide on how you might tie competencies into different job ladder levels. So here's an example of, I'm taking a competency of market analysis from the first line in the blue table. So it's a product management skill, it's market analysis. And the difference here is that the market analysis is kind of the same competency area for junior product managers in the third column and for group product managers in the fourth column. But really, it's the depth and fluency of the skill that's different at the different job ladder levels. For the junior person, there's an understanding, basically, market trends and customer needs. At the group product manager level, you would be expected to be more fluent with deeper, more comprehensive analysis than the junior product manager. So really, in your list of competencies, in your job laddering in the organization, this is why I say it's key to get your competencies right, because if you get your competencies right, you can then assess what level do people need to be operating at the different job levels. So recognizing and rewarding talent. I'll touch on this briefly because it's quite a complex area. But here are some ideas and tips for recognizing and rewarding talent. What I'd say is I've been in a lot of companies where often the only feedback that people get is when things are broken and they go wrong. And I think that, it takes a deliberate mindset shift to actually continuously celebrate the small and the big wins, and to appreciate people and the contribution to the business and the talents that they bring. And so, that's part of becoming a bit more of a people person as you transition out of becoming a product manager to a people leader. So you want to celebrate and appreciate teams and the product managers. and you want to be generous and genuine in your recognition of people. And what I always say is try and catch people doing the right thing and point out when people are doing good things and bringing value to the business and helping you to succeed. Because when you do that, people really feel valued. And if it's genuine from you, it really creates a great team dynamic. When you do give feedback and recognition, do it promptly. Don't wait for months. It's a little bit like how they say, donuts are best served warm. And it's the same with feedback. You should try and give feedback as close to the inciting incident or event as possible to make it timely and relevant. I would say talk openly with your team, highlight in team discussions how different people are contributing and growing and developing and succeeding in the business. Don't just talk to people in an isolated way. You want people to feel the success and see how each are contributing and succeeding to contributing to the success of the business. You should share success with others in the organization. You want to shine a light on the good things. There's a lot of difficulty and complexity in organizations, and it adds a little bit of lightness and levity when you look at the good things. And be sure that your recognition and rewards are relevant to each of your PMs. And this is where you really need to understand the person and their aspirations and their goals, because some people will respond to certain things where others will respond to different things. And what I would say is, invest in your own professional growth, in your coaching skills, in helping people develop personal development plans, the non-product management expertise, which will make the difference between being an average leader and a fantastic people leader. And, invest in the development of your people as well. So let's have a look at a little bit about practicing coaching and encouraging mentorship. I think these are worthwhile things, and they're often spoken about but not acted upon. So you may have grown to be a really super competent product manager. You can launch things, grow revenue, enter new markets, and do all of the great things that a talented product manager can do. But when you're a team leader, like I said before, your main product becomes your people and your team. And you need to excel in developing and growing them. And you need a different set of skills. So, if you've become a product manager because you're technical and you're a great product manager, that's not necessarily going to give you the skills to be a great people leader. So I'd suggest, learning how to grow and coach people. I spent a number of months just personally taking coaching courses so that I could be better at helping people, to help them grow, to help them with aspirations. And it's extremely rewarding as a people leader when you gain those skills and people appreciate it. And you'd use those skills in one-to-one discussions, development conversations, and knowing how you can work with your teams individually or the product managers individually to create development plans. So every interaction that you have, both informal and formal, are opportunities for you to again set your expectations, to nudge people in the right directions, to coach and assist them. Because every time that you do that, it's like putting savings in a bank. You're investing in the growth of that person, in the capability of your team. And over time, that starts to add up and you will start to succeed more as a people leader. So what I would say then is, remember, if you make your team of PMs successful, you're going to be more successful. So I'm leaving this slide here for you, or this table, as a reference, because often people get tied in knots between the difference between coaching and mentoring. And so really it's here just as a bit of homework for you to get clear about what would it mean to be a coach versus using a separate mentor in an organization. So let's have a little look at investing in personal development plans. So personal development plans are a simple document and a way of capturing some practical steps to guide someone's development. They don't need to be complex. In fact, if they're simple, they'll probably get used and they'll have more value. So as a manager, you need to help your PMs to develop their capabilities and flourish. They won't be experts on how to grow and flourish. They might have some ideas, but if you've done your coaching, if you've learned those skills, you know how to develop a personal development plan, you can help them. And what you'll learn very quickly is different PMs learn very differently with audio, video, practical application, personal reflection, and they'll all have very different career aspirations and growth trajectories. And so you need to chat with your PMs and to really understand what their aspirations are, how they learn most effectively. And when you've got that information, then you can have a meaningful conversation. You can help the PMs to craft the plan for their learning and development that resonates with them. So here's just an example of something for your reference. I won't walk through it, but the idea is to have a simple document. The tips would be: keep it simple. Change and growth and learning of new skills takes time, practice, and reinforcement. You're not going to learn every dimension to a high level in product management in a week or a month. You've got to select some improvement and growth areas specifically and try and iterate and move through new learning opportunities, perhaps on a quarterly basis. And what I would say is, choose development items to grow that are good for the company, for the results and delivery, and good for the employee. So they're interesting, motivating, and they're adding value to the skills. It's that happy place where you're investing in something relevant for the organization, which also crosses over and intersects with the interest and aspirations of the employee, of the product manager in your team. So a little bit about measuring the impact of people development efforts. Well, there are a lot of ways of measuring impact, and some of them are relatively simple and straightforward, and some of them will be a complex, cumbersome nightmare which you'll wish you'd never started on the path of going down. But it's your choice, so I would say choose carefully and discuss. So this is a rather large table, and I'm not going to walk through all of it, but I'm leaving it for your reference. And what this is really, I've assembled some different ways that you can measure impact of training and people development efforts. But let's look at two ends of the difficulty spectrum. So what I'm going to do is take a few lines from this and just look at the first line. Well, firstly, we'll look at line 3, employee feedback. This is on the easy end of the spectrum to measure in terms of difficulty. And so employee feedback is, collecting subjective feedback from delegates based upon the training relevance and engagement and applicability of some training they've had. So, it's implemented using, standard survey tools, which you've probably got in the organization. It's not too difficult to implement, and responses can be useful for gauging the training and for any adjustments that you might need in the training to make it more relevant for the product managers. So that's a nice, easy thing which you should be able to get into. Then contrast that with something which might be very aspirational in the organization. So let's look at the very bottom line. This is at the other end of the spectrum of like high difficulty, but it would be very useful if you could do it. And this would be measuring business impact. It might require some serious number crunching. It might need you to baseline and understand and quantify business returns on training effort. It could be, uplift in sales. It could be stealing market share. But likely this is going to be extremely difficult to carry out the analysis, although very useful if you can. And so really, you want to think carefully about choosing something which is easy to get going, easy to implement, gives you some momentum in getting your development efforts moving, and then thinking as a product management leader, what could you measure at the next level, which wouldn't be too onerous, which would give value. For example, could you measure product revenue increase and attribute that to a training intervention? It depends what else is happening in markets and things like that. So anyway, let's look at some of the challenges in a little bit more detail, and that would help you select the appropriate methods. So the difficulty is, like I mentioned, in something like return on investment analysis, you might have to baseline the before measurement to contrast it with the after measurement. You'll know as a product management leader whether you've even got those measurements in place now. So, return on investment analysis for a training intervention might make you shiver in the thought of the complexity of it. So you might have to spend a lot of time and effort to try and collect data to calculate returns, and you begin to wonder, is that level of analysis, although academically desirable, is it really achievable, and what's the cost benefit of doing that? So the other thing is, in business, everything is interconnected, and it can be really hard to isolate changes, knowing, was your revenue increased due to the training? Was your revenue increased due to sales incentive, price incentives, a change in the economy, or wars across the world? It's really hard with a number of changing parameters to try and measure things accurately. So my suggestion, like I mentioned, is to start with some simple measurements and then add more robust measurements over time, but really work with your L&D, learning and development, or HR partners to make sure you're not creating a nightmare for the whole team to try and measure. You need to make it achievable and relatively simple. So I'm going to leave you with some tips here to take away, and we'll move into some brief questions and answers shortly. I won't read through all of these, but they give you a snapshot of some of the things that we've talked about there. I think if you did all of those things, you'd be well on your way to being a superstar of a people leader. So thank you for listening to the webinar. Don't forget that we have lots of free best practice resources that you can sign up for on the website, and you can also sign up to the webinars as well. You're always welcome to join again. So now we're just about to move into the questions and answers. And so just to reiterate, we offer private training for product managers. We offer certification training for new product managers and people who need refreshers. And we offer the leading product management course for leaders or aspiring people leaders of teams of product managers. And we have our free webinars. So if you give me a moment, I shall just swap things here. We're getting quite a few questions in. So Richard's asking about advice when multiple new POs join at the same time. It's a big investment of time to upskill 3 at the same time. Yeah, it is. It's difficult. I won't lie about that. Often, if you've got a bunch of new joiners, what you might do is, if it's only a small number of joiners, you can do something immediately, which doesn't involve a lot of your time. So you can think about adding value by putting people on training courses. So you're immediately contributing and getting them up to speed and getting a baseline. I would say that I think, Richard, there's not an easy answer. What you might do is, if you are setting expectations with people and talking about growth, you might collect some of your product owners together, when you're talking about building the capabilities, talking about development conversations, talking about one-to-ones, you might group them together to kind of set the expectation of how you're going to work together, how you're going to work with professional development plans. And that might reduce the burden a little bit, so you're not having to explain repeatedly to everyone. But I think there is the work then that you are going to have regular, 2 weekly conversations, or 1 every week with someone coaching them. So if you do have a lot of new joiners at the same time, it can be a real burden on you. I'm not sure there's an easy way to reduce that. Patrick, well, thank you. That's delightful for you that you've enjoyed the summary and the webinar. I appreciate your feedback there. That's good. What do you do if product managers want to become a people leader, but there aren't any vacancies available at that level? Well, one thing that you could experiment with is, if that person is quite capable and confident and they could be leading people, you might consider, when you go on holiday, there's an opportunity for someone to kind of step in and run things a little bit while you're away. So, you might think of a growth opportunity where they could dip their toes in the water of, starting to gain some skills there. Or you could start to coach that person in the people development skills. You could start to prepare them. You could start to look at on your job ladders, what skills do they need? You could start giving them coaching skills. You could start to give them more exposure to things across the business. So more people processes. You might involve them in how you think about HR processes without giving away confidential information. So I think there are some things that you could do to start to prepare them. You might also think, would there be an opportunity where you could structure things where, is there an opportunity when you could carve out a super small team where they're only managing a couple of people? I've had that where people have got one or two people in the organization. So rather thinking it has to be a huge team that they're managing, you might think, could it be a small team of people which they are managing, and carve out an opportunity for them. A rule of development for how long to spend on team development per week, per month. It really depends how new the person is. I mean, so what I would say is it depends on your team size as well. But, you might have a team meeting every couple of weeks or every month. It depends. Have you got enough fresh stuff to talk about, cascades from the organization? For people development, when you've got people new into the organization, you might start off with a one-to-one conversation with them on a weekly basis, because you're setting expectations. They don't know what they need to do, and you're nudging them in the right direction. That might drop to a meeting every couple of weeks with them, and informal conversations. So really, you need to be it needs to be dependent on the size of your team. So if you've got 10 people, you might have to spread 10 one-to-ones out over your calendar in a 2-week period, and put perhaps a team meeting in on a monthly period. And then you might have to sequence your calendar. And I would suggest you sequence everything in the calendar and don't leave it to ad hoc. Sequence some things which are going to happen, like formal development discussions, formal promotion or improvement discussions. And I think if you kind of sequence that out in meetings and calendar it, you'll start to see how much how much space you need to carve out to develop the team and the people. And that again scales with the size of the team. Ramiro, thank you. You're very welcome. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. It's your second webinar, and I'm pleased you found it insightful. So, if you found it insightful, please share with other people. Well, I'm sorry I'm a little bit over time there, but if you do have any other questions, you can always ask them. Send questions to info@productfocus.com if you've got any really burning questions about what we've talked about, and someone will drop me a message. So I would just like to end and thank you all for attending. I wish you success in your growth journey, whatever that happens to be, an individual contributor or a people leader, and I hope we can help you in the future. Thank you. Bye-bye.